The galaxy was old. Older than any single mind could truly understand. For 10,000 years, one power had ruled over it all. That power was called the Galactic Throne. The throne did not belong to one planet. It floated above a golden world named Auron Prime, built from metal and light, guarded by fleets so large they could blot out a sun. Under the throne's rule lived thousands of alien species. Some were small and gentle, some were large and fierce. But all of them, in the end, obeyed the throne. No one had ever dared to stand against it and survive. Children across 1,000 worlds were taught the same lesson in school. The throne is eternal. The throne is unbeatable. To fight the throne is to fight the galaxy itself, and no one wins that fight. For 10,000 years, this lesson had never once been proven wrong. Every rebellion had been crushed. Every rival empire had been humbled. Every proud species that dared to raise a weapon against the throne had, sooner or later, learned to kneel. Because of this, the throne's council had grown comfortable. Comfortable in a way that only unbroken power can make a ruler comfortable. They no longer studied their enemies carefully, because for a very long time, they had not needed to. Old habits, when they work for 10,000 years, are very hard to question. This is the story of the empire that finally questioned them, and the story of the one old general who saw the danger coming long before anyone else was willing to look. But before we speak of that empire, we must speak of one alien. His name was General Vrax. Vrax was not young. His skin was a deep gray, marked with old scars from wars long forgotten by everyone except him. He stood taller than most humans, with 4 eyes that missed nothing, and a voice that could silence a room without being raised. For 80 years he had served the throne. He had crushed rebellions. He had burned worlds that dared to resist. He had never lost a battle. Because of this, the younger officers respected him. Some even feared him, but none of them understood him. They saw only the medals on his chest and the fleets under his command. They did not see the tired eyes behind his calm face, eyes that had seen too much war to enjoy any more of it. Vrax did not want more war. He wanted peace. The kind of peace that comes only after enough victories that no one dares to fight you again. For most of his life, he believed the throne had already won that peace. The galaxy was quiet. The throne was strong. There was nothing left to fear. He had earned his rank the hard way, not through politics or family name, but through decades of hard campaigns on distant, forgotten worlds. He remembered every battle he had fought. He remembered the names of soldiers he had lost, even the ones from 50 years ago. This was rare among throne generals. Most of them collected victories the way children collect toys, without ever counting the true cost. Vrax counted every cost. It was this habit, this quiet discipline of always paying attention, that would soon save more lives than he could ever imagine. Then came the humans. It began as a small matter, a border patrol, nothing more. Vrax's fleet was moving along the edge of throne territory, checking old trade routes for pirates and smugglers. It was routine work, the kind of task given to a general only to keep him busy between real wars. His scanners picked up a single ship, small, slow, unarmed, as far as the sensors could tell. A trade vessel, carrying the flag of a species the throne barely knew anything about. A species from a small blue planet far on the edge of known space. Humans. Vrax had heard the name before in passing. A minor species. Not a member of the throne's empire, not yet conquered, not yet even properly studied. Some scouts said humans were curious and friendly. Others said they were stubborn and difficult to deal with. No one thought they were dangerous. Why would they be? They had no great fleet, no powerful weapons that anyone had seen. Just a handful of ships that traded quietly at the edges of alien space, minding their own business. Vrax ordered his ship to approach. It was simple procedure. Stop the vessel, inspect it, ask a few questions, then let it continue on its way. He expected nothing more than a short delay in his day. He did not expect what happened next. The human ship did not run. It did not panic. It simply slowed down and opened a communication channel, calm as still water. A voice came through, translated by the throne systems into Vrax's own language. It was a human voice, a male voice, steady and polite. This is Captain Reyes of the trade vessel Wanderer. We are a peaceful ship. We mean no harm to you or your fleet. Vrax answered in his usual commanding tone. "You are in throne territory. State your business, and you may pass." "We are simply trading," Reyes replied. "Nothing more. We are not looking for trouble." Vrax almost ended the call there. It seemed a simple, boring exchange, exactly what he expected. But something in the human's voice made him pause. There was no fear in it. No nervousness. Every alien species Vrax had ever met when facing a throne war fleet for the first time showed some sign of fear. A shake in the voice. A pause before answering. Something. The humans showed nothing. Vrax leaned forward in his chair. "You understand," he said slowly, "that my fleet could destroy your ship in a single moment if I wished it." There was a short silence. Then Reyes spoke again, and his words were calm, almost gentle. But they carried a weight that surprised the old general. "You could try," Reyes said, "but I would ask you not to. Not because we are afraid of you, General. Because you should be a little afraid of us." The bridge of Vrax's flagship went completely silent. His officers turned to look at him, waiting for his reaction. No one spoke to a throne general that way. No one. Vrax felt something he had not felt in decades. Not fear, not yet. Curiosity, mixed with something colder underneath it. A warning, buried deep in his old warrior instincts, the kind of feeling that had kept him alive through 80 years of war. He said nothing more. He let the human ship pass. That night, Vrax could not stop thinking about the conversation. He pulled up every file the throne had on humanity. There was not much. A handful of trade reports, a few notes from minor diplomats who had visited human colonies. Nothing about their military. Nothing about their weapons. Nothing about why one human captain would speak to a throne general with such calm confidence. He decided to learn more. Not through reports, but through direct experience. Over the following months, Vrax quietly gathered more information. He spoke with other officers who had crossed paths with human ships. Slowly, a pattern began to form. Humans never started fights. They avoided conflict whenever possible, but whenever a fight was forced upon them, even a small one, they won it, quickly and cleanly, using tactics no alien fleet had ever seen before. A pirate group once attacked a human cargo convoy, expecting easy loot. The pirates were destroyed within minutes, their ships disabled with precision, not one human vessel damaged. A rival alien empire, one that had never bowed to the throne, tried to seize a human mining outpost. Within a single day, their entire invasion force was gone, and the human outpost continued working as if nothing had happened. There was one report that stayed in Vrax's mind longer than the others. A small group of slavers, known for capturing weaker species and selling them across the outer worlds, had targeted a human colony ship, believing its passengers would make easy prisoners. The slavers had done this 100 times before, against 100 different species, always with success. This time the slavers simply vanished. Their ship was found weeks later drifting empty and powerless near an asteroid field. Every weapon system disabled, every door sealed shut from the inside. No bodies, no signs of struggle. No explanation at all, except a short recorded message left on the ship's system, spoken calmly in the human language. Choose better targets next time. None of these events were widely reported. They were small, scattered across the edges of known space, easy to overlook if you were not looking closely. But Vrax was looking closely, and what he saw disturbed him deeply. Humans were not simply lucky. They were not simply clever with small tricks. Every single encounter showed the same pattern: calm decision-making, superior tactics, and a complete unwillingness to panic, even against far larger forces. Vrax began to understand something that no one else in the throne's high command wanted to believe. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was simply waiting. Months later, Vrax's fleet was assigned to patrol a border system close to human territory, following reports of unusual activity. It was meant to be another simple mission. Instead, it became the turning point of his life. A group of smaller throne warships, part of Vrax's larger fleet, spotted what looked like an abandoned human research station near a quiet moon. The commander of that smaller group, a young and eager officer named Galactic, saw an opportunity. He believed capturing the station and its technology could bring him honor and a quick promotion. Vrax warned him against it. "Leave it alone," he ordered. "We are here to patrol, not to provoke." But Dalek was ambitious, and young officers do not always listen to old generals, especially when they believe a great victory is within easy reach. He believed the old general was simply too cautious, too slow, too tired to see a golden opportunity when it appeared in front of him. He took 3 warships and moved toward the station without full authorization, confident that he would return with a prize worth celebrating. Vrax watched the 3 ships pull away from the main fleet on his bridge display, and felt a cold, familiar dread settle in his chest. The same dread he had felt before every disaster he had ever witnessed in 80 years of service. He ordered his communications officer to keep an open channel, and he waited. What happened next took less than 11 minutes. The station was not abandoned. It was a trap, quiet and patient, exactly the kind of thing Vrax had begun to suspect humans were capable of. As Dalek's ships approached, hidden human vessels, small and fast, appeared from behind the moon, using its gravity and shadow to stay completely hidden until the perfect moment. The battle was short and one-sided. Dalek's 3 warships, each far larger than any single human vessel, were disabled within minutes. Their weapons were jammed by signals no one on the throne side understood. Their engines were struck with precise, targeted attacks that avoided killing the crew, but left the ships completely helpless, floating silently in space, dark and powerless against the stars. Not one human ship was lost. Not one human life was taken. The humans could have destroyed Dalek's entire group. They chose not to. Instead, a single message was sent to Vrax's flagship, calm and clear, spoken by a voice he now recognized. It was Captain Reyes again. "General Vrax," the voice said, "your officer made a mistake today. We have returned his ships, undamaged, along with his crew. We ask only one thing in return. Please do not test us again. We do not wish for war. But if war comes, we will not lose it." The channel closed. Vrax sat in silence on his bridge for a long time, staring at the empty screen where the message had been. He was not looking at fear anymore. He was looking at absolute certainty. Vrax had spent 80 years fighting for the throne. He had seen empires rise and empires fall. He had seen fear in the eyes of 1,000 enemies right before their final defeat. He knew, better than almost anyone alive, what true strength looked like, and what it did not look like. What he had just witnessed was not luck. It was not a clever trick, used once and never again. It was discipline. It was patience. It was restraint. The rarest and most dangerous quality any warrior could possess. Humans had the power to destroy his officer's fleet completely, and they chose calmly not to use it, sending only a warning instead. That single choice frightened Vrax more than any weapon could have. A species with great power that chooses violence is dangerous, yes, but it is predictable. It is a species that can be understood and eventually defeated. But a species with great power that chooses restraint, that chooses patience, that chooses to warn instead of destroy, again and again until finally pushed too far. That is a species that will not lose when the true war finally comes. Because when a patient enemy finally stops holding back, there is no mercy left to offer. Vrax thought back over his long career, searching his memory for any enemy who had ever behaved this way before. He found none. Every rebellion he had crushed had been loud and angry, striking first out of fear or pride, giving the throne every excuse it needed to respond with overwhelming force. Every rival empire he had humbled had made the same mistake, attacking too early, boasting too loudly, revealing its full strength long before it was ready to use it wisely. Humans did none of these things. They did not boast. They did not strike first. They did not even seem angry when they won. They simply returned what they had taken, gave a calm warning, and went back to their quiet lives among the stars, as if nothing important had happened at all. To Vrax, this was the most unsettling detail of everything he had learned. An enemy who fights out of anger can be provoked into mistakes. An enemy who fights only when necessary and stops the moment the threat is gone cannot be provoked into anything at all. It simply waits. Vrax understood in that quiet moment on his silent bridge that the galaxy was standing at the edge of something it did not understand. The throne had ruled for 10,000 years by being the strongest power anyone had ever seen. It had never needed patience because it had never needed to hold back. Humanity was different. Humanity held back because it did not need to prove its strength to anyone. It simply waited, calm and certain, for the day it might finally be forced to show it completely. Vrax did not want to see that day arrive. Not because he doubted the throne's power, but because, for the first time in 80 years of service, he doubted whether that power would be enough. That night, alone in his private quarters aboard his flagship, General Vrax composed a message. It was short. He rewrote it many times, trying to find words strong enough to carry the weight of what he had learned, yet simple enough that even the most arrogant member of the throne's council could not misunderstand it. In the end, he kept it short. 9 words. 9 words carrying 80 years of hard-earned wisdom, and a warning he prayed the throne would actually hear. Leave the humans alone. I am begging you. He sent the message directly to the Galactic throne, marked with the highest level of urgency his rank allowed. Then he sat back in his chair, looked out at the stars through his window, and waited. He did not know, not yet, whether his warning would be heard. He did not know that on Auran Prime, in the golden halls beneath the throne itself, his message was about to be read aloud in a room full of laughter. He did not know that a young council member would call it the funniest thing I have read all year, while an old general far away sat alone with the weight of a warning no one wanted to believe. He did not know that the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen was only just beginning. For now he simply sat in the dark, watching the stars, listening to the quiet hum of his ship's engines and hoping, with everything left in his old warrior's heart, that somewhere in that golden palace, someone would actually listen. 9 words. That was all General Vrax had sent to the Galactic throne. Leave the humans alone. I am begging you. 9 words, carrying 80 years of hard-earned wisdom and a warning that could have saved an empire, if only someone had chosen to listen. No one did. The message arrived on Auran Prime late in the evening cycle, delivered to the Grand Council chamber, a room built entirely of gold and dark polished stone, tall enough to make even powerful generals feel small. This was the heart of the Galactic throne, where every major decision in the galaxy had been made for 10,000 years. Tall windows lined the chamber walls, showing an endless view of stars and passing ships, a constant reminder to everyone inside of just how much territory the throne controlled. Statues of past emperors stood along the edges of the room, each one carved larger than life, each one seeming to watch over the current council with silent, permanent judgment. It was a room designed in every detail to remind anyone who entered it that they stood at the very center of galactic power. At the center of the chamber sat Emperor Solveth, ruler of the throne, a tall alien with pale golden skin and eyes that had grown used to looking down on almost everything in the galaxy. Around him sat his 12 council members, each one representing a different region of throne space, each one just as comfortable in their power as the Emperor himself. The Emperor's personal aide, a nervous young alien named Threll, was the one given the task of reading Vrax's message aloud to the council. Threll had read thousands of messages before, mostly boring reports about trade numbers and minor border disputes. He had never read anything quite like this. He cleared his throat and read the message exactly as it was written. Leave the humans alone. I am begging you. For a moment, the chamber was completely silent. Then, one of the council members, a heavy-set alien named Boris, began to laugh. It started small, just a low chuckle, but it spread quickly around the room, jumping from council member to council member like fire through dry grass. Within moments, the entire chamber was filled with laughter, loud and careless, echoing off the golden walls. Emperor Solveth himself smiled, a thin, amused smile. General Vrax, he said slowly, tasting the words like a fine drink. One of our oldest and most decorated commanders is begging us to leave alone a species we have never even heard of until 3 months ago. Perhaps the great general is finally getting old, Boris said, still chuckling. Perhaps 80 years of war has finally softened his nerve. Another council member, a sharp-featured female alien named Kessa, leaned forward with interest. What do we actually know about these humans besides General Vrax's sudden fear of them? Threll, still standing at the front of the chamber, quickly checked his notes. Very little, Counselor. A small species, from a single planet called Earth, not officially part of throne territory. They trade quietly along the border systems. No large military has ever been recorded. No advanced weapons technology has been reported by any of our scouts. So, Kessa said, sitting back in her chair. A small, harmless species with no army worth mentioning, and General Vrax wants us to be afraid of them. The laughter grew louder. Emperor Solveth raised one hand, and slowly, the laughter faded into an amused, waiting silence. When the Emperor spoke, every voice in the chamber stopped completely, out of habit built over 10,000 years of unquestioned rule. I have known General Vrax for many years, Solveth said. He has never once shown weakness. He has never once asked us for anything in 80 years of loyal service. This message, foolish as it sounds, deserves at least a small amount of respect. Boris straightened in his chair, adjusting his expression to seem more serious. Of course, Your Majesty. However, Solveth continued, I do not believe for one moment that a species with no military history, no known advanced weapons, and no significant population poses any real threat to the throne. What I do believe is that General Vrax has perhaps grown too cautious in his old age, seeing danger in shadows that do not exist. He paused, looking around the chamber slowly, enjoying the attention of his council, but we cannot simply ignore the warning of a general who has served us so well. That would be disrespectful, and it would look weak to the rest of the Empire, if word ever spread that we take no action after receiving such a message. Kessa tilted her head. What action do you propose, Your Majesty? Solveth smiled again, wider this time. A small punishment fleet. Enough ships to teach these humans a simple lesson in respect. Enough force to remind them exactly whose galaxy they are living in. Nothing excessive. Nothing that requires our full attention. Just enough to put General Vrax's mind at ease and to put humanity firmly in its place. The council members nodded, murmuring agreement. It seemed to everyone in that golden chamber like a reasonable, moderate decision. A small show of force, nothing more. No one in the room, not even the Emperor himself, believed for a single moment that this decision would change the fate of the entire galaxy. They were wrong. Far away, on the small blue planet called Earth, and across the scattered human colonies that stretched quietly along the galaxy's edge, life continued exactly as it always had. There were no golden chambers here, no thrones, no crowds of nobles competing for the attention of an all-powerful emperor. Instead, there were simple offices, simple ships, and simple people, doing careful, disciplined work, day after day, without ever seeking attention or glory. In a modest command center on a human colony called New Haven, a young engineer named Maria Okafor sat at her console, reviewing data from a routine deep space sensor array. She was 26 years old, quiet by nature but sharp-minded, the kind of person who noticed small details that others often missed. That morning she noticed something odd, a faint energy signature, moving slowly through the outer edge of human-monitored space. Not an attack, not even close enough to be an immediate concern, but unfamiliar and worth reporting. She flagged the data and sent it up the chain of command exactly as she was trained to do, without panic, without exaggeration, simply stating the facts as she saw them. Within an hour, her report reached Commander Elias Grant, a calm, steady man in his 50s, who had spent most of his career quietly preparing humanity's defenses, long before most people believed such preparation was necessary. Grant read the report carefully twice before speaking to his second-in-command. This matches the pattern we discussed last year. Movement, then a pause, then more movement. They are gathering something out there. Should we be worried, sir? His second-in-command asked. Grant thought for a moment before answering. Worried is the wrong word. Prepared is the right one. We do not start fights. We never have. But we do not ignore warning signs either. Increase monitoring along the outer systems. Quietly. No alarms. No panic. Just eyes open. This was the human way. Not boasting, not mocking, not laughing at unfamiliar danger, the way an entire golden chamber full of powerful aliens had just done, many light years away. Simply watching, calmly, and preparing, without ever needing anyone's permission or approval to take a threat seriously. That evening, Maria sat with a few of her colleagues in the colony's small dining hall, eating a simple meal after a long shift. The conversation, as it often did lately, turned toward the strange increase in alien activity along the border. "Do you really think they're planning something?" asked a young technician named Sam, sitting across from her. Maria shrugged, stirring her food thoughtfully. "I think it doesn't matter what they're planning. We just do what we always do. We prepare, we stay calm, and if it turns into something real, we handle it." "Doesn't it scare you, though?" Sam asked. "They've got fleets bigger than anything we've ever built. Whole empires. We're just us." Maria was quiet for a moment before answering, choosing her words carefully the way she chose everything in her life. "Size isn't everything, Sam. My grandmother used to say something like that, about people, not about spaceships. But I think it still applies. It's not about how big you are. It's about how clearly you can think, and how well you can hold steady when everyone around them expects you to break." Sam considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly, comforted in a small way by her calm confidence. "I hope you're right," he said quietly. "I know I'm right," Maria said, offering him a small, tired smile. "Look at our history, Sam. We didn't get here by being the biggest or the strongest. We got here by surviving things that should have wiped us out 100 times over. Ice ages, diseases, wars against ourselves that nearly finished the job before any alien ever showed up. If there's one thing humans have always been good at, it's refusing to quit, even when the odds look impossible." Across the table, an older woman named Dr. Chen, one of the colony's senior researchers, had been listening quietly. She set down her cup and spoke for the first time. "The aliens out there have never had to fight for their survival the way we have," she said. "Their empire has ruled unopposed for 10,000 years. They have forgotten what it feels like to truly struggle. We haven't. And that difference matters more than any fleet size." The table fell into a thoughtful silence. The kind of silence that comes not from fear but from quiet, shared understanding. This was the quiet strength of humanity. The strength that no golden council chamber, full of laughter and easy confidence, had ever bothered to notice or understand. It did not come from massive fleets or ancient conquests. It came from something much simpler and far harder to defeat. The steady, patient discipline of people who had learned, over a long and difficult history, exactly how to remain calm when everything around them said they should panic. Back on Orin Prime, preparations for the small punishment fleet moved forward quickly. Word spread across the golden halls of the throne's capital, and within days, it had become something of a joke among the younger officers and nobles. "A whole fleet, just to deal with a handful of humans," one young officer laughed, sharing drinks with his friends in one of Orin Prime's many social halls. "I heard General Vrax nearly wet himself over these people. Imagine that. 80 years of war, and he's scared of a species that doesn't even have proper warp technology. Maybe he's just looking for an easy win before retirement," another suggested, raising his glass. "A guaranteed victory to end his career with." The group laughed together, clinking their glasses, completely unaware of how wrong they were about to be proven. The fleet itself was assembled under the command of a proud young admiral named Korvath, eager to make a name for himself with a quick, easy victory. Korvath had never lost a battle either, though unlike Vrax, his victories had come mostly against poorly organized, weaker opponents, easy fights dressed up as great achievements. He wore his uniform a little too proudly, and he spoke a little too loudly, the way young men do when they have been told all their lives that they are destined for greatness, and have never once been forced to question it. Korvath had personally requested this mission, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to step out of the shadow of older, more experienced generals like Vrax. A quick, clean victory against a supposedly weak species would look excellent on his record, and would surely earn him a seat on the council within a few short years. He had already begun imagining the celebration that would greet his return. Korvath stood before his assembled fleet on the day of departure, giving a short, confident speech to his crews. Broadcast across every ship in his command. "Soldiers of the throne," he announced proudly. "Today we sail toward a small, insignificant world, to remind its people of their place in this galaxy. This will not be a difficult mission. Some of you may even find it boring. But remember, even the smallest victories serve the glory of the throne." Cheers erupted across the fleet's communication channels. Soldiers laughed, joked, and boasted about how quickly the mission would be completed. Bets were placed on how many hours it would take before the humans surrendered completely. Somewhere far behind them, in his quarters aboard his flagship, General Vrax watched the fleet depart on his monitor, his 4 eyes narrowed with quiet dread. He had tried to warn them. He had used every ounce of respect he had earned over 80 years of loyal service to send that warning, and it had been answered not with caution, not with careful planning, but with laughter, jokes, and a proud young admiral eager for an easy victory. Vrax knew, with a certainty that settled deep and cold in his chest, that Korvath's fleet was not prepared for what awaited them. They believed they were sailing toward an easy lesson. They were sailing, instead, toward the beginning of the end of everything the throne had ever known. As Korvath's fleet moved steadily through the dark space between the stars, growing closer each day to human territory, something else was happening, quietly, far ahead of them, in the calm and disciplined heart of human command. Commander Grant sat once again with his officers, reviewing the latest data from Maria's monitoring stations. The faint energy signatures they had first noticed weeks earlier had grown clearer, more defined. There was no longer any doubt about what was approaching. "It's a fleet," Grant said simply, looking at the data displayed before him. "Not a massive one, but large enough to be a serious threat if we were the kind of people who reacted with panic." "Orders, sir?" one of his officers asked. Grant did not hesitate. "We do what we always do. We do not attack first. We do not show unnecessary force. We prepare our defenses, quietly and completely, and if they come with peaceful intentions, we welcome them exactly as such. But if they come with hostile intentions—" He paused, looking around the room at the calm, steady faces of his officers, people who had spent years quietly training for exactly this kind of moment, without ever needing glory or recognition to do their jobs well. "Then we make absolutely sure it is the last mistake they ever make." There was no cheering in that room, no boasting, no easy jokes about guaranteed victories. Just quiet nods, steady breathing, and the calm, focused energy of people who understood, deeply and completely, exactly what needed to be done, and exactly how seriously it needed to be taken. Grant looked around the room one final time before dismissing his officers. "Remember," he said quietly, "we are not doing this because we want to fight. We are doing this because we understand something that fleet out there does not yet understand. Peace is not something you get by hoping for it. Peace is something you protect, carefully, patiently, and if necessary, firmly. That is the only kind of peace that lasts." His officers nodded, and one by one they returned to their stations, carrying his words with them into the long, quiet hours of preparation that followed. Far above the planet, hidden carefully among asteroid fields and quiet shadows, human ships began, silently and without fanfare, to take their positions. They did not know exactly when the alien fleet would arrive. They did not know exactly how many ships would come or exactly what those ships intended to do. But they knew, with the same calm certainty that had guided every decision humanity had made since its first difficult steps into the stars, that whatever came, they would be ready for it. Somewhere between the stars, Admiral Korvath's proud, laughing fleet continued forward, full of confidence, full of easy jokes about quick, guaranteed victories. They had no idea that somewhere in the quiet darkness ahead of them, humanity was already watching them come. The journey took 11 days. For Admiral Korvath and his fleet, those 11 days felt more like a long, boring holiday than a military mission. His crews spent their time telling stories, playing games, and making bets about how quickly the humans would surrender once they saw the true size of a throne warfleet. Korvath's flagship, the Oran's Glory, led the way, followed by 40 warships of various sizes, each one carrying soldiers who had grown up hearing stories of the throne's endless victories and had never once imagined losing a battle against anyone, let alone a small unknown species from the edge of known space. The Oran's Glory itself was an impressive sight, its hull polished to a bright shine, decorated with the golden symbols of the throne, built more to impress than to hide. This was, after all, meant to be a simple lesson, not a real war. There had seemed no reason to travel quietly, when the whole point of the mission was to remind the galaxy of the throne's overwhelming power. By the 10th day, the mood on board had turned almost festive. Soldiers painted small human symbols on the sides of their armor, a joke meant to mock the enemy before the battle had even begun. Officers organized informal competitions, betting on which ship would land the first strike and how many hours it would take before human ships surrendered completely. Korvath himself watched all of this with quiet approval. High morale, he believed, was the mark of a confident, disciplined force. He did not once consider that overconfidence and true discipline were, in fact, very different things. In his eyes, an army that laughed easily was an army that feared nothing, and an army that feared nothing could not possibly lose. On the 11th day, the fleet finally crossed into the outer edge of human-monitored space. The moment the fleet crossed that invisible border, something changed. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. The usual background chatter across the fleet's communication channels seemed to fade slightly. Sensor operators, previously relaxed and casual, began sitting a little straighter in their chairs. There was no clear reason for this shift, no obvious threat on any screen, but the space around them simply felt different. Korvath noticed it too, though he refused to say anything about it out loud, unwilling to seem nervous in front of his crew. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, arms crossed, watching the empty space ahead of them on the main view screen. "Report," he said finally, his voice a little sharper than he intended. His sensor officer, a young alien named Pris, checked her readings carefully. "Nothing unusual, sir. No enemy ships detected. No energy signatures. The area appears completely empty." "Completely empty," Korvath repeated slowly, unable to keep a small note of unease from creeping into his voice. An empire preparing to defend itself should show some sign of activity. Ships moving, defenses being raised, something. Instead, there was nothing but silence, stretching out ahead of them like a held breath. "Perhaps they already know we are coming, and have chosen to hide," suggested Pris. "Hiding," Korvath said, forcing a confident smile back onto his face for the benefit of the bridge crew watching him. "Of course they are hiding. Weak species always hide when true strength approaches. Continue forward, standard formation. Let us give these humans a proper introduction to the throne." The fleet moved deeper into human space, ship after ship gliding silently through the dark, past quiet asteroid fields, past small, empty-looking moons, past everything, without a single sign of resistance. The silence, rather than comforting Korvath, began to weigh on him more heavily with every passing hour. 80 years of throne military history had taught every officer the same lesson. Silence before battle was rarely a good sign. Far below, hidden carefully within the shadow of a large, quiet moon named Perch, humanity waited. Commander Grant stood in the command center of a heavily disguised outpost, watching the alien fleet's slow approach on his monitors, calm and steady despite the enormous responsibility resting on his shoulders. Around him, dozens of officers worked quietly, checking systems, confirming positions, adjusting the final details of a plan they had spent months preparing. Maria Okafor, the young engineer whose sharp eyes had first noticed the fleet's approach weeks earlier, now sat at a critical station, monitoring the enemy's exact formation and movement patterns. Her hands were steady on her console, though her heart beat a little faster than usual. "They're entering the final approach corridor," she reported quietly. "Formation is exactly as predicted. No deviation." Grant nodded, satisfied. "Good. Predictable is exactly what we hoped for." Humanity's plan was simple in its design, though it had taken enormous discipline and patience to prepare properly. Dozens of small, fast human ships, each one specially built for stealth and precision, had positioned themselves carefully across the region, hidden behind moons tucked within asteroid fields. Powered down just enough to avoid detection by the approaching fleet's sensors, these were not massive warships built to overpower an enemy through brute strength. They were smaller, smarter vessels, designed around a very different philosophy of warfare, one built on patience, precision, and calm, coordinated timing rather than raw power. "All units, confirm final positions," Grant said quietly into his communicator. One by one, quiet confirmations came back from dozens of hidden ships scattered silently across the region, each pilot and crew perfectly still, perfectly patient, waiting for the exact right moment. "Remember," Grant added, his voice calm but firm, "we do not fire first. We wait for their first hostile action. When it comes, and it will come, we respond immediately and completely. No hesitation, no mercy after that point, but not one shot before it." Maria watched her console, her fingers resting lightly on the controls, her breathing steady despite the tension building around her. Beside her, a young pilot named David spoke quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. 11 months of drills for this one moment. 11 months well spent, Grant said, overhearing him. Every simulation, every late night, every argument about formation and timing, all of it built toward exactly this. Trust your training. Trust the pilot beside you. That is all any of us can do now. The room fell into a focused, patient silence, broken only by the quiet hum of equipment and the occasional soft confirmation from a hidden ship reporting its position. There was no fear in that silence, only readiness, the kind of calm that comes from knowing a plan has been built carefully, tested thoroughly, and trusted completely. Korvath's fleet reached the final approach point exactly as predicted, moving cautiously now, sensors fully active, searching every corner of space for any sign of the human defenses that simply refused to appear. Still nothing, sir. Pris reported again, her voice tighter than before. Korvath stared at the empty view screen for a long moment, jaw tightening. The eerie silence had begun to unsettle even his most confident officers. Some of the earlier jokes and bets had quietly stopped. The festive mood of the journey had faded completely, replaced by a growing unspoken tension that spread slowly through the entire fleet. Send a communication to the nearest human colony, Korvath ordered finally, deciding to force the issue rather than continue waiting in uncomfortable silence. Demand their immediate surrender in the name of the Galactic Throne. The message was sent, translated carefully into the human language, broadcast toward the nearby colony of New Haven. The response, when it came, was calm, short, and completely unafraid. This is Commander Elias Grant, representing the Defense Forces of New Haven Colony. We have received your demand. Our answer is no. We ask respectfully that you turn your fleet around and leave human space peacefully. This is your only warning. Korvath's officers exchanged uneasy glances. A tiny colony facing an entire throne war fleet had just calmly refused to surrender and dared to offer a warning of its own. Korvath's pride flared instantly, drowning out whatever small doubts had been building inside him. They dare to warn us, he said, his voice rising with anger and disbelief. A handful of primitive ships, daring to threaten a throne fleet? Enough of this. Move the fleet forward. Target their colony's main defense grid. Show them exactly what happens to those who refuse the throne. The order was given. Weapons across the fleet began charging, preparing to fire the first shots of what Korvath still believed even now would be an easy one-sided battle. He had no idea that the moment his weapons powered up, he had just given humanity exactly the signal they had been patiently waiting for. The battle began not with a massive explosion, but with a single, precise strike. One of Korvath's lead warships suddenly lost all power, its systems going dark in an instant, disabled by a focused energy pulse fired from a small human vessel that had remained completely hidden until that exact moment, tucked silently behind a nearby asteroid. Before Korvath could even process what had happened, more strikes followed, rapid and precise, each one targeting a different ship's engines or weapon systems, never aiming to destroy completely, always aiming instead to disable quickly and efficiently. "Enemy ships!" Pris shouted, her earlier calm completely shattered. Multiple contacts appearing from all directions. "They were hidden, sir. They were hidden the entire time." Korvath's confident expression collapsed into pure shock as his main view screen filled with dozens of small, fast human ships, emerging suddenly from behind moons, asteroids, and quiet shadows, moving with a speed and precision his own fleet had never encountered before. "Return fire!" Korvath shouted, his earlier calm confidence replaced by rising panic. "All ships, return fire immediately." But precision, Korvath's fleet soon discovered, was not something that could be matched simply by firing more weapons. The human ships moved with an almost impossible level of coordination, each vessel seeming to know exactly where its allies were, exactly where the enemy was weakest, exactly when to strike and when to retreat. Throne warships, larger and more heavily armed individually, found themselves unable to land a single solid hit on their smaller, faster opponents. Every attack the humans made seemed to arrive from an unexpected angle, striking critical systems with careful, deliberate accuracy, while somehow avoiding the kind of reckless, wasteful destruction that would have caused unnecessary loss of life. Within minutes, more than a dozen Throne warships had been completely disabled, their weapons silenced, their engines powerless, drifting helplessly in the dark, exactly like Dalek's ships had drifted weeks earlier near that first quiet trap. Aboard his flagship, Korvath watched in growing horror as ship after ship reported critical damage, weapons failure, complete loss of power. His confident officers, who only hours earlier had been laughing and placing friendly bets, now shouted increasingly desperate reports across the bridge. "Engine 2 is down. We've lost weapons control on the starboard side." "They're everywhere, sir. We can't get a clear shot." On the main view screen, Korvath watched one of his largest cruisers, the Iron Fang, spin slowly out of formation, its engines dark, small human ships already moving past it toward their next target without a second glance, as though the massive vessel were nothing more than an obstacle to avoid rather than a threat to fear. It was, Korvath realized with growing horror, exactly that. A ship that had taken years to build and represented enormous cost and pride had been reduced in seconds to nothing more than drifting scrap, not even worth a second strike. Korvath gripped the edge of his command chair, his mind struggling to understand what was happening. This was not supposed to happen. This was supposed to be an easy lesson, a quick display of Throne superiority against a weak, unprepared enemy. Instead, his proud fleet was being systematically dismantled piece by piece by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move before it was even made. "Concentrate all remaining fire on their largest visible ship," Korvath ordered, desperately searching for any advantage he could find. But even this order proved useless. The human ships never remained in one place long enough to become an easy target. They struck quickly, retreated smoothly, and reappeared moments later from a completely different direction, moving with a calm, disciplined rhythm that felt less like chaotic battle, and more like a carefully rehearsed performance. In truth, it was exactly that. Every human pilot in that battle had trained for years, not for glory, not for personal honor, but for exactly this moment, following a plan built on patience, precision, and complete trust in every other pilot around them. 20 minutes after the first shot was fired, the battle was effectively over. Of Korvath's original 40 warships, 31 had been completely disabled, drifting powerless in the dark. 6 more had been forced to retreat, badly damaged, barely able to maintain basic life support. Only 3 ships, including Korvath's own flagship, remained even partially operational, and even those were struggling with severe damage to their weapons and engines. Not a single human ship had been destroyed. Not a single human life had been lost. Across the battlefield, human pilots began carefully checking on the disabled enemy vessels, confirming that crews remained alive and their life support systems intact. This was not mercy shown out of weakness. It was mercy shown out of confidence, the quiet confidence of a force that had already proven everything it needed to prove, and saw no reason to cause unnecessary suffering once victory was secured. Commander Grant's calm voice came through on an open channel, addressing the shattered remains of Korvath's once proud fleet. "Admiral Korvath," Grant said, his tone steady and completely without malice, "your fleet is defeated. We do not wish to destroy what remains of it. Power down your remaining weapons and we will allow your surviving ships to return home, along with your wounded. This is not a request, it is a mercy we are choosing to offer you exactly once." Korvath sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the wreckage of his fleet floating helplessly across his view screen, his pride shattered as completely as his ships. Slowly, with a defeated voice barely above a whisper, he gave the order. "Power down weapons," he said. "All remaining ships, stand down." Far away, aboard his own flagship, patrolling a quiet border system, General Vrax received the full battle report hours later, reading through it in complete, heavy silence. Every detail matched exactly what he had feared, exactly what he had tried desperately to warn the Throne about. A supposedly weak, primitive species had defeated an entire Throne punishment fleet, using discipline, patience, and precision far beyond anything the Throne's military had ever encountered. And yet even now, knowing the terrible cost of ignoring his warning, Vrax felt no satisfaction, no sense of being proven right. Only a deep, tired dread, settling once again into his old, scarred heart. He knew, with absolute certainty now, that this humiliating defeat would not go unanswered by the proud, arrogant council on Orin Prime. If anything, it would only provoke a stronger, angrier response, driven not by wisdom, but by wounded pride. Vrax closed the report slowly, staring out at the quiet stars beyond his window, and whispered softly to himself, in a voice heavy with dread. They still do not understand what they are dealing with. Far behind him on the golden world of Orin Prime, news of Korvath's defeat was about to reach the throne's council chamber, shattering, in a single moment, 10,000 years of unquestioned confidence. The galaxy, whether it was ready or not, was about to learn the true meaning of humanity's quiet, patient strength. News travels fast in a galaxy connected by instant communication. By the time Admiral Korvath's broken fleet limped back toward throne space, the story of his defeat had already spread across 1,000 worlds. At first, no one believed it. A single human colony defeated an entire punishment fleet? This question was repeated in council chambers, military bases, and public gathering halls across the Empire, always followed by disbelief, and often by nervous laughter, the kind of laughter people use when they are trying to convince themselves that something frightening cannot possibly be true. In taverns and trading posts across a dozen alien worlds, the same story was told and retold, growing slightly different with each telling, as stories often do. Some versions claimed the humans possessed secret weapons stolen from a forgotten ancient civilization. Others insisted the entire battle had been exaggerated, a simple misunderstanding blown far out of proportion by embarrassed throne officers looking for someone else to blame. But the proof was undeniable. 31 disabled warships, 6 more severely damaged. Not a single human casualty. The numbers alone told a story that no amount of denial could erase. Slowly, carefully, the laughter that had once filled the Grand Council chamber on Orin Prime began to fade, replaced by something the throne had not felt in 10,000 years. Uncertainty. Emperor Solveth sat alone in his private chambers on the evening the full battle report arrived, reading through it again and again, as though repeated reading might somehow change the numbers written on the page. It did not. He thought back to that evening weeks earlier, when he had laughed along with his council at General Vrax's warning. He remembered dismissing it easily, confidently, certain that 80 years of unbroken victory had simply made an old general too cautious. He remembered, too, the faces of his council members that evening, Boris chuckling loudly, Kessa smiling with easy confidence, the whole chamber united in careless, comfortable laughter. Not one of them, including himself, had paused even for a moment to ask a simple, obvious question. What if the old general, who had never once been wrong in 80 years, happened to be right this time as well? Now, sitting alone with the true cost of that dismissal laid out clearly before him, Solveth felt something he had not felt since he was a young, inexperienced ruler, still learning the true weight of his position. Doubt. He called for General Vrax personally the next morning, requesting his presence at the capital as quickly as possible. This time, there would be no laughing council chamber, no mocking comments, no easy dismissal. This time, Solveth intended to listen. Vrax arrived on Orin Prime 3 days later, stepping off his personal shuttle onto the golden landing platform, with the same tired, steady expression he always carried, though those who knew him well could see something new in his eyes. Not satisfaction, not anger, only a heavy, patient sadness, the kind carried by someone who had tried desperately to prevent a disaster and had watched it happen anyway. He was escorted immediately to the Grand Council chamber, where Emperor Solveth waited alone, having dismissed the rest of the council for this particular meeting. General Vrax, Solveth said quietly as the old commander entered. Thank you for coming. Vrax bowed respectfully, though his voice carried none of the usual formal distance expected between an emperor and his general. You asked for me, Your Majesty. I came. Solveth gestured toward a chair, an unusual gesture of informality that surprised Vrax slightly. Please, sit. I think perhaps for the first time in a long while, I would like to simply talk, rather than command. Vrax sat down slowly, his old joints aching after days of travel, and waited patiently for the Emperor to continue. I read your warning again, Solveth said finally, his voice quieter than Vrax had ever heard it. 9 words. I dismissed them without a second thought. I am beginning to understand, General, that this may have been the single greatest mistake of my reign. Vrax said nothing for a long moment, considering his words carefully before speaking. Your Majesty, I did not come here today to remind you of my warning. I came here because there is still time to prevent an even greater mistake. Solveth looked up, curious. Go on. After the battle, Vrax explained, I studied everything available about the human response. Their commander, a man named Elias Grant, allowed our surviving ships to return home. He offered mercy, Your Majesty, to an enemy fleet that had come specifically to attack his people. This was not weakness. This was a choice made deliberately by a species that clearly understands the difference between necessary strength and unnecessary cruelty. You believe this offers us an opportunity, Solveth said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his expression. I believe, Vrax said carefully, that humanity does not want war with the throne. Everything I have learned about them points toward this same conclusion. They defend themselves fiercely when attacked, but they have never once, in any encounter we know of, struck first. They show restraint even in victory. A species that behaves this way is not seeking conquest. They are seeking only to be left in peace. Solveth considered this carefully. And if we simply demand their surrender again with an even larger fleet? Vrax's expression darkened. Then I believe, Your Majesty, that we will discover exactly how far their restraint truly extends, and I do not believe any of us wish to witness that discovery firsthand. A patient people, pushed too far, do not fight small, careful battles anymore. They fight to end the threat completely. I have spent my life studying warfare, and if there is one lesson I have learned above all others, it is this. Never mistake calmness for weakness, and never assume patience has no limit. The chamber fell into a long, thoughtful silence. Outside the tall windows, the golden light of Orin Prime's sun spread slowly across the horizon, illuminating a capital that had ruled unopposed for 10,000 years, now facing, for the very first time, the real possibility that its unbroken reign might finally be tested beyond its limits. What do you suggest, General? Solveth asked finally. Vrax met the Emperor's eyes directly, something few in the throne's history had ever dared to do so plainly. I suggest we do something the throne has never done before in its entire history. I suggest we ask for peace, honestly and directly, before pride forces us into a war none of us can be certain we would survive. Far away, on the quiet human colony of New Haven, news of the throne's crushing defeat spread quickly among the population, though it brought none of the celebration one might expect after such an overwhelming victory. Commander Grant addressed his people simply, gathered in the colony's main hall, his tone calm and measured, exactly as it always was. We did not seek this fight, he said. We do not celebrate it either. 37 ships were disabled today. Thousands of soldiers, following orders they likely did not fully understand, were nearly killed because of decisions made far above their rank. We should feel relief that our people are safe. We should not feel pride in what happened to theirs. Maria Okafor, sitting quietly among the gathered crowd, listened carefully to these words, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, that the danger had passed without human losses, but also a quiet unease, wondering what would come next, now that an empire 10,000 years old had been humiliated by a single decisive battle. What happens now, Commander? Someone in the crowd asked. Grant considered the question carefully before answering. That depends entirely on the throne. If they choose anger, they will return with greater force, and we will defend ourselves again, exactly as firmly as before. But if they choose wisdom, there is a path toward something better than war. We have never wanted conquest. We have never wanted an empire of our own. We have only ever wanted to be left to build our future in peace. If the throne is willing to accept that simple truth, there need not be a war at all. 3 weeks later, a small unarmed human diplomatic vessel approached Orin Prime, requesting formal permission to enter throne space. This alone was remarkable, considering the recent battle, but even more remarkable was the calm, respectful tone of their request, carrying no hint of anger or desire for revenge. The vessel was received cautiously, but without hostility, escorted carefully to the capital by a throne honor guard personally arranged by General Vrax, who had insisted on overseeing every detail himself. Aboard the vessel was a small human delegation, led by Commander Grant himself, accompanied by 2 advisors, and, at her own quiet request, Maria Okafor, chosen specifically for her calm, careful manner and clear understanding of the events that had led to this unprecedented meeting. They were brought before Emperor Solveth in the Grand Council chamber, the same golden room where Vrax's warning had once been laughed at so carelessly. This time, the chamber was silent, every council member present watching closely as history quietly unfolded before them. Grant stepped forward respectfully, his voice calm and steady, carrying easily across the vast chamber. "Emperor Solveth," he began, "on behalf of humanity, I wish to state clearly and honestly why we have come here today. We do not seek your throne. We do not seek conquest of your worlds. We seek only the simple right to live peacefully, to grow, and to build our future without fear of unnecessary conflict. If you are willing to offer us that peace honestly, we are equally willing to offer you the same in return." Solveth studied the human commander carefully for a long moment before responding, his earlier arrogance replaced now by something closer to genuine respect. "Your fleet defeated ours without seeking to destroy it completely. Your commander," he glanced briefly toward Vrax, standing quietly nearby, "believes this reveals something important about your people." "It does," Grant said simply. "We fight only when necessary and only as much as necessary. Nothing more. This is not weakness, Emperor Solveth. It is a promise we make to ourselves about the kind of people we choose to be, even in war." The negotiations that followed took several more days, careful and detailed, covering trade agreements, border boundaries, and mutual protections designed to prevent future misunderstandings from escalating into unnecessary conflict. Throughout these discussions, General Vrax remained closely involved, offering careful, experienced guidance drawn from decades of hard-earned wisdom. At times, the discussions grew tense. Some council members, still uncomfortable with the idea of treating a small, newly encountered species as true equals, argued for stricter terms, hoping to preserve at least some measure of the throne's traditional authority. Vrax spoke firmly against this thinking each time it arose. "We are not negotiating from a position of strength pretending to be generous," he reminded the council plainly, during one particularly difficult session. "We are negotiating from a position of honest respect, earned the hard way. Let us not insult that respect by pretending otherwise." His words, backed by the undeniable memory of Korvath's shattered fleet, carried enough weight to settle each disagreement in turn. At one point during a private conversation, Vrax approached Maria directly, curious about the young engineer whose sharp observations had first detected his fleet's approach months earlier. "You were the one who first noticed our fleet," he said, not as a question, but as a simple statement of fact. Maria nodded, slightly surprised that the general knew this detail. "Yes, sir, it was mostly luck. I happened to be reviewing the right data at the right time." Vrax studied her carefully with his 4 eyes, an expression that might, on his old scarred face, have been the beginning of a smile. "In my experience, young engineer, luck rarely favors those who are not already paying careful attention. Perhaps it was not luck at all. Perhaps it was simply discipline wearing a familiar disguise." Maria considered this thoughtfully, unsure how to respond to such an unusual compliment from someone who had, until recently, commanded fleets capable of destroying entire worlds. "Thank you, General," she said finally, offering a small, genuine smile. On the final day of negotiations, a formal treaty was signed between the Galactic Throne and the newly recognized Human Assembly, establishing clear boundaries, fair trade agreements, and, most importantly, mutual recognition of each other's right to exist peacefully, without fear of unnecessary conquest or interference. It was, in the throne's 10,000-year history, the first treaty ever signed as equals, rather than as ruler and conquered subject. As the ceremony concluded, Emperor Solveth turned privately to General Vrax, standing quietly at his side. "You saved us today, old friend," he said quietly, using a term of familiarity he rarely offered to anyone. "Not through victory, but through the simple courage of an honest warning." Vrax bowed his head slightly. "I only spoke the truth, Your Majesty. It was you who found the wisdom to finally listen." Solveth allowed himself a small, genuine smile, the first true smile Vrax had seen from him in many years. Let us hope the rest of the galaxy learns this lesson as well, before it costs them as dearly as it nearly cost us. Word of the treaty spread quickly across 1,000 worlds, carried by traders, diplomats, and curious travelers, eager to understand exactly what had happened between the ancient, unbeatable throne and a small, unknown species that had somehow forced an empire to the negotiating table. Different species reacted differently to this news. Some laughed nervously, unsure what to make of it. Others studied the reports carefully, quietly reconsidering long-held assumptions about the true balance of power in the galaxy. A few, wiser than most, understood immediately exactly what had truly happened. On distant worlds far from either throne or human space, small councils of alien elders began quietly revising their own history lessons, the same lessons that had, for 10,000 years, taught every child that the throne was eternal and unbeatable. It was a small change, barely noticeable at first, but it marked something important. The beginning of a galaxy, learning to question old certainties it had never before dared to challenge. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy had been forced to learn an important lesson. True strength is not always loud, boastful, or eager to prove itself through conquest. Sometimes, the most dangerous power in the galaxy is the kind that waits patiently, speaks calmly, and strikes only when absolutely necessary, never seeking more than what peace honestly requires. Humanity had not sought to rule the stars. It had sought only the simple right to live among them, peacefully, on its own quiet terms. And in the end, that quiet, patient determination had achieved something no army of conquest ever could: genuine respect, freely given, by an empire that had once believed such respect was theirs alone to grant. And on that day, for the very first time, the galaxy finally began to understand exactly why that simple, quiet strength was something no empire, no matter how ancient or powerful, should ever again make the mistake of underestimating. The galaxy had thousands of empires and only one throne. But from that day forward, everyone knew there was only one species you never, ever wanted to threaten twice.